We're talking about 4 factors now in our time together that hemorrhaging faith identify as the 4 key factors. And the one was parents, the second was God, and now the third is community. One of the strongest messages that emerged from another piece of research is this: that a community of believers, now fasten your seatbelt, which is welcoming, accepting, inviting, joyful, enthusiastic, encouraging, and loving. Now that's exhausting, isn't it? But I love it. A community of believers which is welcoming, accepting, inviting, joyful, enthusiastic, encouraging, and loving is the most powerful testimony possible. And then the next sentence in their report is this: it constitutes a significant contribution to people's journey to God. And then I love this line: it's like a compelling invitation to a banquet. Does that describe your church? Is your church, as it exists in that community, is it perceived to be like a compelling invitation to a banquet? Well, that kind of church is not only a significant contribution in a person's journey to faith in Christ, it's a significant contribution to people staying when they hit those teenage years, that young married couple. It's a significant contribution. Young people today, young couples today, are interested, I think, in becoming part of a dynamic movement, not a stagnant institution. Now, I want to work with those 2 metaphors. Would you describe your church as a dynamic movement, or is it a stagnant institution? Stagnant institutions are, number 1, stagnant in function. One young person writes, I just saw so much talk and so many sermons about the good we should do, but yet I didn't see a whole lot of action from the church. Like if you would go to a conference or church, they would talk about all the things we should do, but you just go and nothing would happen. Now that's a tragic observation for a young couple to make. Stagnant in function. No vision, no passion, no movement. They're just settled. Now here's how you can determine whether that's your church or not. Where were you 5 years ago compared with where you are today? Where do you plan to be 5 years from today compared with where you are today? See, your church is settled. You're quite content. No movement. No movement in 5 years? You're not planning any movement in the next 5 years? That's why we lose young couples. That church has become stagnant in function. Another student writes, I dropped out because people were annoying and judging. That's stagnant in feelings. No love. What they experienced in the church was people were sarcastic, people were complaining, people were critical, the way they talked to each other. Stagnant in functions, going nowhere. Stagnant in feelings. No love, no sense of companionship. That's a stagnant institution. And those kind of institutions lose people. And that's the challenge that we have. On the other hand, there's the active church, the dynamic movement. Dynamic movement is the kind of movement that's active in function. They're growing, helping, serving, equipping, moving forward, dreaming, and reaching out. I love that, don't you? That's the kind of church I want to be at. That kind of church is an invitation. One of our daughters and her husband are part of a ministry of a church that's been in existence 7 or 8, maybe 10 years. 7 years ago, they moved into the area, became part of the church. It was a relatively small building. They had a Sunday morning service. 3 Sundays ago, they began their 4th service. They have 3 Sunday morning services, and now they have a Saturday night service. All 3 Sunday morning services are 90% to 100% crowded. Their Saturday night service that they started 3 weeks ago, the church was 80% full. That's a church that's a dynamic movement. When they started, they had a vision. And their vision was to reach the unchurched or people who had left church. They weren't interested in playing church politics. They weren't interested in the transfers. They were going unchurched people and people who had given up on the church. And they're on the move. I go there and spend some time there, and had the privilege last time I was there to teach an adult Bible class for several weeks. It's a church that's on the move. It's a dynamic movement. Movement in function. Movement in feelings. That's what's important. Movement in feelings. Dynamic feelings. And where people are talking together, people are working together, people are communicating with each other. There's a life that's existing there. Now, my question this morning is this afternoon. How do you build a community like that? It takes more than changing the name on the church. A lot of assemblies are now not called gospel halls or Bible chapels. They're called community churches. That doesn't make you a community church. How do you build a community church? Well, I've got 3 simple suggestions for you. The first suggestion is, remember the metaphors that are given to us in the New Testament for the church. It's a body. It's a family. You like to sing, "I'm glad I'm part of the family of God," don't you? It's a family. It's a household. That's the picture in the New Testament for your church, for your chapel. Is it functioning like a body? Is it? How's it working out? Bodies that are functioning like bodies are growing, helping, serving, equipping, moving forward, dreaming, and reaching out. That's a dynamic movement. That's a body at function, a body at work. What a difference that body can make. And that's the challenge, I think, that we've got. That's how you develop a loving community. You decide that you're going to function as a family. Our family now is 28 strong. I became a great-grandpa 2 months ago. So our family now goes from 2 months to 60 or a little bit more. That's our family. 28 strong. Thanksgiving weekend, we had 21 at our home for the weekend. 21 of the 28. Some couldn't get there. One's a hockey player, he was playing hockey. 21 of the 28. Young ones, older ones. When that little 2-month-old baby was born, my wife and one of our daughters and one of our nieces in Toronto drove 14 hours to spend a day and a half and to see that new baby. That's family. That's family. Now that's the picture for your church. It's to be a family. I'm not in many churches that are families. That's the kind of church that gets ignited and gets all excited and things can happen. You know, one of the reasons why it's not is because the metaphor that best represents most of our churches in this room is not a body, not a family, not a household. It's a 3-layer cake. That's how we live mostly. We've got that generation, this generation, and this generation. This generation doesn't get along with that generation certainly doesn't like this generation. We're a 3-layer cake. We don't know much about body life. We're not much of a family. You don't treat those teenagers the way my mother treated that 2-month-old child. That's family. And if you're going to keep that generation so that they're participating in a compelling invitation to a banquet to come to your church, that they're going to be part of a dynamic movement, then one of the things that you're going to learn to do is to not buy into the generational distinctions that are made in our culture and society today. And it starts with our generation here. It starts with my generation. Me dealing and relating and setting them on. It starts with you if you're an elder in the church. Who do you speak to on Sunday morning? How much time do you spend with that row of teenagers over here? See, we're a family. If we're going to be a family, we're going to act like a family and connect with a family. How many of those young couples are you involved with? How many do you pray for? How many do you know are dealing with a problem and you're involved? We're a family. We're not a generation and a generation. We're family. That's my first piece of advice. Got to understand the metaphors of the New Testament and get it functioning. My second piece of advice is to remember the mission. And the mission, of course, is to go into all the world. And that happens to be the street next door, the house next door, the street around the corner. That happens to be your Jerusalem. If I were to come around and walk up and down the street by your church, I would ask somebody next door, what do you know about that church down the block, around the corner? What do you know about the church? Oh, really? What difference has the church made in your community? Oh, really? If they closed up shop today, what would you miss? Oh, really? You'd lose on all 3 points. Most of us would. Because we're much better at dealing with people over in 1,000 miles than we are with the people next door. You want to keep that generation? Then you need to understand that it's a dynamic movement. That's what keeps them. That's what they want to be part of. Not a stagnant institution. Remember the metaphors. Remember the mission. And lastly, remember this imperative. Half of the verse you love, and you made a big deal out of it. The first half of the verse says, don't forsake the assembling of yourself together. Do you know what the rest of the verse is? But encourage one another. What that verse is saying, don't leave our church. Don't stay away. That's what the verse is saying. Don't quit. We need your generation. Don't quit. We want to become a family, a dynamic movement. And one of the key injections is that we encourage one another. Try it. That's how you keep them.